As the Keys take an absolute pounding from Hurricane George, we lucked out a little bit here in Dade County. We'll give you an update on what's going on shortly.
Hi, meteorologist Bill Keneally. We're here in Naples, Florida. The squalls of Hurricane George just beginning to move in. We'll have a full report on Weather Center coming up next.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Jill Brown here on the Weather Center, and we are talking about Hurricane George, a powerful hurricane now blamed for as many as 300 deaths in the Caribbean. It is now centered over Key West, and you can see here from the satellite picture, it is a fairly compact hurricane. They're just getting the clouds and the wind gusts where Bill and Jim are. We'll check back with them in just a moment for full details on Hurricane George, and we'll also be talking about where it may stop next. This will not be the last stop of Hurricane George. Joining me now is Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane expert, and as I was just telling you, we've talked to someone on the telephone who said in Key West they are now in the eye of the hurricane.
That is correct. It sure looks like it. If they're not, they're very, very close, and what that means is they're going to be on the other side of the eye wall very quickly. Looks like the eye is about maybe 30 miles in diameter at most, and it's moving at 14 miles per hour. So depending on how it crosses it, at the very most an hour and a half, then the winds will pick up very quickly, and they already realize that they're in the eye. So it's probably less than an hour before the winds pick up out of the southeast very strong, and the surge comes in too. So if anybody's out there listening and you're running around near the water, I suggest you get away from the water.
It'll come back in very quickly. Now, the one thing, Steve, that we've noticed before is that when you come to the backside of the hurricane, typically the second eye wall is not nearly as strong, but now that this is basically over open water, will that not be the case this time?
Yeah, it's just the opposite in this case. The eye wall on the backside is stronger than in the front. We've seen a rather weak one and not too much in the way of rainfall. The back, on the other hand, is a very strong eye wall and a lot of rain. So the strongest winds are definitely behind the center of the hurricane.
Okay, so in Key West, don't venture far from home. Again, the back eye wall will be coming back in shortly. Let's take a look at the latest information here. Winds are now up to 105 miles per hour as it moves northwest at 14 miles per hour. Steve, this is exactly what was expected, and it is gaining some strength at this point. How much stronger is it expected to get?
Well, the National Hurricane Center has it going to Category 3 as it moves up toward the northern Gulf of Mexico up here. And that's probably a reasonable and safe estimate. However, it could be much stronger.
Okay, definitely something to watch. And hurricane watches, speaking of which, have been issued now from Morgan City, Louisiana to St. Marks in Florida. That's anticipating that second landfall. Right now it's in South Florida where we have the hurricane warnings in effect. So again, these are the areas from Morgan City, Louisiana to St. Marks in Florida where you should start just taking those early precautions, thinking about what you might need to do if hurricane warnings are eventually issued there. And we'll talk more about that track here coming up shortly. In South Florida, the warnings are in effect now, meaning hurricane conditions are either being felt right now or are expected from Longboat Key around to Florida City. And what would you say to folks along the West Coast at this point, Steve? Doesn't look like they're going to see the worst of this.
Well, the East Coast up here is probably going to be spared here. Along the west coast of Florida, as we go out through time, we may see those hurricane warnings creep up the coast, and the tropical storm warnings creep up the coast as well as the hurricane inches up the coast. So I think we'll see these warnings creep up as in the same general direction as the hurricane.
Okay, speaking of which, we have two crews standing by on location in the areas that do have hurricane warnings. We do have Jim Cantori, who is in Key Biscayne in Florida around the Miami area, and Bill Keneally in Naples. And these two areas so far haven't been too bad. We start you off with Jim Cantori, and it looks like folks in Miami, although we've heard about some power outages, have not seen the worst of this one.
No, they may have not, Jill, because as you mentioned, those bands can still move through, and I think that's what's, if anything, that's what's going to catch people off guard, is when those bands come on through and produce a brief period of heavy rain and also gusty winds. I mean, we just had a little gust of wind that came through here, you know, easily 50, 55 miles an hour. So that's the worst case scenario for the Miami area. But there are still power outages, especially in South Dade County down through Homestead and Coral Gables. Some 20,000 people is what they estimate without power, and until these winds begin to die down, and they're a lot worse down there, that from what we're hearing, so the power crews can't get out and reestablish the power. You can see here behind me over the bay that we still have quite a nice little chop The winds have shifted a little bit too in the last half hour. They've come now a little bit more out of the south and east, and you can see as that boat is anchored down there, it's not enjoying the wind. It's tilted over quite a bit as the wind is pretty much perpendicular to the way that the boat is facing. But we can see the skyline in Miami, and we can occasionally even see the sun poke on through the clouds. So it has not been that bad a day at all, and folks are even starting to return to their homes from some of the shelters. But don't let your guard down, as you said, Jill, because we can still get those squalls that come on through. Other than that, the Miami International Airport is going to start bringing flights in around 2 o'clock this afternoon if these winds wind down a little bit. Let's find out what's happening on the West Coast with Bill Keneally.
All right, Jim, thanks a lot. Again, we're breathing a collective sigh of relief here as well in Collier County. Yesterday, they were evacuating upwards of 42,000 people, or 1/5 of the population of the county. Hopefully everybody took advantage of the opportunity to head to shelters, although really, to be honest, so far so good here. Looking down the beach, they've done a major reclamation project. Some $20 million has been invested in the reclaiming of the beach. Over the years, it had been eroded away, but hopefully we can sustain the wrath of Hurricane George. Why don't we pan out over the water, get out there over the high clouds, and you can see there's some rather ominous-looking low cloud cover, scud, if you will, kind of hanging down. Some pretty decent rain bands with that, but really so far we've been in pretty good shape. All in all, some rain would not be welcome here. We've had an awful lot of rain recently, so the more we can keep offshore, the happier the population will be. Now let's get a check on what's happening. We want to take you now to our Spanish-speaking network, and for that we'll go to Mari Ramos at the Weather Channel's Latin American Bureau. Mari?
Thank you, Bill. Well, let's go to Spanish now. Y para ustedes que nos acompañan, televidentes de habla hispana, quiero comenzar nuevamente mostrándoles las condiciones del tiempo aquí en la ciudad de Miami. También pueden notar aquí la zona del sur el centro, ya comienza nuevamente a caer algunas gotas de lluvia. Es por eso que es muy importante que recuerden que todavía podemos ver algunas bandas de precipitaciones que podrían llegar a ser localmente intensas. Se mantiene también un aviso de tornados en esta zona, una alerta de tornados, perdón, también alertas por posibles inundaciones locales. Así que todavía no es el momento de bajar la guardia, manténganse bien informados aquí con The Weather Channel, el canal del tiempo, que vamos a mantenerlos bien informados. Pasemos ahora de regreso con Jill Brown. Back to the studio.
Okay, thank you very much, Mari Ramos. Let's take a look at radar here, and we'll show you these areas where our crews have been. Mari Ramos and Jim Cantori here in Key Biscayne. We've had Bill Keneally over here in Naples, and you can see that there has not been a lot of rain in either of these areas so far, but it's not far off. Steve Lyons, what do you think as far as the rainfall goes? We haven't seen really impressive amounts yet.
It's been a rainy system historically. In other words, over the Dominican Republic and Haiti, I think a lot of the deaths that we've been...
But it's Key West that is reeling from Hurricane George. The hurricane picked up strength crossing the Keys. The hurricane's eye brings quieter weather, but life-threatening conditions have already returned to Key West on the backside, and looks like the backside of this eye may be just as strong, if not stronger, on the front side. So you can see the damage that has already occurred. We'll continue to assess that. Hurricane George overall has been responsible for as many as 300 deaths as it came through the Caribbean. Now that it's gone through Key West, we have another stop in sight, and it may be just a couple of days down the road. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Here's our satellite picture, and you can see the center of circulation, maybe not a well-defined eye, but that has just passed over Key West. The clouds are working their way up through the peninsula, and as is the heavy rain. So we'll be checking with our crew in just a moment. But joining me now is Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane expert. And Dr. Lyons, what do you think the folks on the West Coast, it looks like they won't have a direct hit from this hurricane, but what can they expect? I'm sure they're curious, they're anxious at this point.
That's for sure, and as it moves up to the north, they're going to experience some fairly strong winds. Tropical storm force winds, maybe even hurricane force winds, but as it moves up this way, if it gets farther from the coast, they'll be in better shape. The good thing is as the flow is offshore, you're not going to develop any waves, no waves and no surge. It'll have to be onshore winds behind the eye that develop the waves, and you may have some surge with the southerly flow along the coast that's transporting water to the coast. But the first portion of the storm, there will be virtually no impact other than some potential damage from wind, and that will be minimal.
Well, that's kind of deceiving. It'll be after the storm is north of folks before they may get the worst of conditions. So this is one to...
At and behind, that's right.
Okay, let's take a look at the latest stats on Hurricane George, and you'll see here winds are now 105 miles per hour. That has increased today. It's been on a steady path to the northwest at 14 miles per hour, pressure 981 millibars. And the one thing that we've seen now is the watches and warnings have just started to change, and anticipating our second hit up the coast. The new hurricane watches are in effect now from Morgan City, Louisiana to St. Marks in Florida. Otherwise, we have hurricane warnings. We can go in a little bit closer to show you these. And it's from Longboat Key through Sarasota, Fort Myers, Bonita Beach. You have hurricane warnings. Of course, they're still in effect in the Keys, and that's the case actually up through Florida City. Although we've been checking with our crew recently, Dr. Lyons, in the Miami area, and things are really fairly quiet. It's nice to see that folks were very prepared, but they've been lucky this time.
They've been lucky, and I hope they realize that they were lucky, and preparation was not for naught, because we can't call it that close all the time.
And if you don't close to the eye, sometimes you'll get very quiet conditions. Folks down the road can be much worse off.
Absolutely. It wasn't very far away from them. Very, very close hit, close miss, I should say.
All right, speaking of close misses, let's go to our crew. We've had a couple of crews standing by this hour. We're going to Jim Cantori. He's in Key Biscayne, where it's a windy day, a wet day, but not so bad compared to what might have happened if this was just a little farther to the east. Jim?
That's exactly right, Jill. You know, when the first few advisories came out with regards to George, you know, we were right in that highest strike probability for quite some time, so people said, oh boy, you know, here we go with another Andrew. So tremendous preparation here in Miami in every aspect, and you got to take your hats off to these people here. Unfortunately, we do have some prices to pay, and that is of power outages, especially in southern Dade County. Here in Miami-Dade, not too bad at all. We're taking you off to the sky. You can see some dark skies off to our south and west, and interestingly enough, we just had a pretty decent squall that moved through here. I want to show you this boat, which was earlier docked probably about 50 feet up near this island, and the last squall that came through, Jill, has pushed it all the way down. Now, of course, it's been anchored in, and it still is, but the wind was so strong, and the fact that the boat is perpendicular to the wind, you're getting that push from the wind. So we are still getting some pretty healthy wind squalls that come through here, and that's the biggest problem this afternoon. So watch out for the flash flooding with the heavy rains that come on through, and also the high winds, because they could at least temporarily knock out power. And until the winds die down completely, they will not be able to get out here and restore the power. As far as the airports go, what we've heard from Miami International is they will be letting flights in, only in, at around 2 o'clock this afternoon, and Fort Lauderdale will be letting flights out at approximately 4 o'clock this afternoon. So slowly but surely, things getting back to normal, but they pretty much yesterday shut down the city, and no one was allowed on out, and that's exactly the way it is today. People have braced for a strong hurricane, and as you mentioned, the fortunate thing is they did not get one. But this should be a big lesson to the folks along the Gulf Coast. The preparation was done wonderfully, and they were prepared for the worst. Let's hope that the same holds true for those folks up north. Back to you, Jill.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I know Friday's never a fun day to travel. It's good to hear the airports will be open again shortly. We'll check back with you a little later on. If you look at the latest radar here, you'll see that in Miami, we've been watching these thunderstorms, and Jim is right about in here. Last hour we showed you the one cell that we thought was just about to come through. Looks like he's about to see another one, Steve, and they will continue to see some heavy rain. That's right. Off and on showers throughout the day and into the evening, and of course with those very strong gusty winds, well above 50 miles per hour. And the heaviest rain at this point is down toward the Keys. In Naples, it looks like the rain's just beginning to come in. We'll be checking back with our crew there coming up shortly. What do you think folks from Naples to Fort Myers should start preparing for in the next couple of hours besides the rain? Well, they should also be starting to see some strong gusty winds when the rains come in, and the winds picking up even if the rain isn't there. So gradually but steadily deteriorating weather. It will be overcast the rest of the day. Not a good Florida day, but we've seen this hurricane now come through the Keys. You can see the wind field here, and the tropical storm force winds are indicated in yellow. Tropical storm force winds can do damage, but it looks like at this point that the hurricane force winds may even stay just barely off the west coast. Do you think that could be possible? That's a possibility, although they are under a hurricane warning. So what they should expect to have is hurricane conditions, even though right now it looks a little more optimistic than that. But do not let your guard down, because you might be sorry. A slight shift off the immediate track, and they could be in the hurricane force wind. Exactly. All right. And one other thing that, of course, we always have to worry about with a landfalling tropical system is the possibility of tornadoes. And we've had a couple of warnings that have come in. In Brevard County, you still have a tornado warning. Also, Osceola County, you have a tornado warning. Both of these for another 5 to 10 minutes. The latest radar here shows a relatively quiet day from Tampa to Orlando, but remember that any of these thunderstorms in this outer band could be tornado producers, and we'll keep you up to date on where the warnings are in this area. Dr. Lyons, we haven't had any, I think, confirmed reports of tornadoes. How much farther north and how much longer after the tornado continues to move off do we have to worry about severe weather?
We should worry about it as long as there's thunderstorms over the Florida Peninsula today and tonight. So I would say...
Hurricane George brings stormy conditions to Marco Island as the hurricane brushes the southern tip of Florida. Marco Island is just south of Naples, where winds have been gusting up to 84 miles an hour. And the area has also been encountering heavy squalls. These stormy conditions will persist through the afternoon and into the evening. We've been updating you on Hurricane George now for many, many days. As it came through the Caribbean, it caused severe flooding and mudslides and has killed as many as 300 people. It is now north of Key West, and here's the latest information. Just barely north, that's the center of this hurricane, 15 miles northwest of Key West. Winds are 105 miles per hour. It continues moving to the northwest at 14 miles per hour. Pressure's 981 millibars. We've seen some changes in this hurricane today, and to talk about that is our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. We saw this a little bit weaker hurricane earlier this morning.
We did, and now it's strengthening. It's up to 105 miles per hour, and it's going to still strengthen more, and we think it may get to Category 3 within the next 24 to 36 hours.
So it has come through Key West as a Category 2 hurricane. By the time it makes the next landfall, the northern Gulf Coast could be a Category 3.
Could be a Category 3 major hurricane. It's possible that could be stronger than that even, but right now the official forecast by the Hurricane Center is a 3. That's a little bit probably a conservative estimate, but not too bad.
All right, things will get worse from here, it looks like. Take a look at the latest satellite picture of Hurricane George, and we'll give you an idea of where it is centered. Obviously, center of circulation, not a well-defined eye, but there it is. And they should be getting southerly winds, so still the south-facing coast will be getting the overwash from the storm surge beginning to come in.
Absolutely. The very strong winds right in this band in the eye wall here, and also in this other band of thunderstorms right in this area as well. Two very strong rain bands there, and both areas are experiencing some very strong winds. Gusts to over 100 miles per hour up in here, and strong gusts here in Key West as well.
So that because the eye has passed, don't begin to think that the hurricane force winds are over with yet. As a matter of fact, here is a look at a Doppler estimate of winds for the Key West area.
That's correct, Jill, and here's the radar center right here, and what we're looking at is the inbound and outbound velocity. So this is the direction that's perpendicular to the direction of flow, so we can get the motion is that way. That's the first thing we can get from this Doppler radar. The second thing is we can get how fast the wind is coming into the radar and how fast it's going out by looking at the color shades on the scale here. Of course, it only goes up to hurricane force on the dark red and the blue, and you can see both of those on there. Of course, we have a peak estimate at high altitude of over 112, almost 123 knots as we go through time. That's not necessarily at the surface, but very, very strong winds still there.
Alrighty, so again, the winds going around our hurricane like this. This is the core of strongest winds right through the Key West area and to the east, and you can see this on the radar actually as well. You can see those bands of heavier rain. Well, now those would coincide with the stronger winds as well?
Absolutely. The wind aloft is always stronger than the wind at the surface, so if there's a way to bring that fast wind down to the ground, it's going to be faster there, and that mechanism is usually thunderstorms that have downdrafts associated with them. And so these bands here, even up here near Key Largo here, they're going to get some very strong winds in here behind the hurricane.
When do you think that the folks in the Keys can expect to see conditions improve enough that they'll be able to go back home?
Well, it looks like they still got probably at least 12 more hours before the thing clears the Keys, and there may still be some strong thunderstorm areas down there. The other thing too is I'm sure emergency management officials have to make sure the roads are safe and not flooded out before they let people venture back down.
Okay, sit tight for a while longer. We'll keep you up to date. Let's show you where the watches and the warnings are in effect, and remind you that we now have new hurricane watches up the coast expecting that next landfall. We'll talk more about that track in just a moment. A hurricane watch, of course, means that you should just start your preparations. When the warning comes up, that means conditions are expected to be hurricane conditions within 24 hours. Of course, that's what we have down through here, where you see the red on the map. Hurricane conditions are expected, and that's true in the Naples area, which is right about in here. That's where we've had our crew standing by. Bill Keneally has been in Naples for the last 24 hours to endure some beautiful weather yesterday, and so, well, not so great weather today. I noticed the waves are getting bigger behind you there, Bill.
Everything is changing in a very subtle way here, Jill. You're right, the waves are getting a little taller, not much. They're on the order of 1 to 2 feet right now. But more importantly, it's the direction the swell is coming in from. Last night and earlier today was coming in from the northwest. Now it's starting to turn more. And as I look behind me, you can see the swell coming in more from a southwesterly direction. That is a function of the hurricane. Hurricane George is now officially in the Gulf of Mexico, and all these swells probably started propagating out earlier today, and it's about 100 miles or so to our south-southwest, and it's traveling, 14 miles per hour, so these swells take a good 7 hours to come on in, but they are coming in now. So we'll be watching for the prospect of some taller waves, possibly coinciding with a high tide around 3 o'clock this afternoon. I think more importantly, a more prominent problem could be the high tide about 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. The other angle, Jill, the rain. We've had one, I'd call it a fairly nasty squall with maybe minimal tropical storm force wind. That's been about it. It's been threatening us all the time. We're seeing these rain bands angle our direction, then they take an abrupt left turn. Now, I'm sure they are hitting the southern portion of Collier County, but so far here in the more populated areas in the Naples and Fort Myers corridor, we've gotten off pretty good, and that's good news. This area has had some very saturated soil for quite a while. Back to you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Unfortunately, we think you'll be seeing more rain very shortly. We'll check back with you there.
My suspicion is you're right.
Okay, we'll be watching the radar. In the meantime, we'll also talk about the high tide. Bill had mentioned at the time of high tide, we may have a little bit more of a problem. High tide does come down along the Gulf Coast at different hours, of course, depending on where you are. In Naples, it's at 3:30. How important is this with this hurricane?
Well, right now, in this particular area and in the Gulf in general, the tidal ranges are not extreme. They're on the order of anywhere from 1 to 3 feet. In some areas, maybe a little bit more than that. So, in the case of the East Coast, the tidal ranges can be as high as 8 to 10 feet, and that's extremely important. So it's not as important in the Gulf, but if it's a difference between topping a levee in New Orleans and not topping a levee by the tide, it's extremely important there as well. We'll have to keep an eye on that as it moves north into the northern Gulf of Mexico. All
right, we have a couple of days before we'll be talking about that specifically. In the meantime, the rain, as we mentioned, is coming in, has not been especially heavy in and around the Naples area where Bill Keneally has been. Some passing showers. We haven't seen the severe weather down through here either, and even the winds have not been as strong away from the Keys. They've been maybe tropical storm force gusts.
That's correct, and keep in mind, Bill's over here on the west coast. The wind trajectory is this way. It has an overland trajectory, so as it comes overland, it weakens. And above the surface, it may still be fairly strong. And in a thunderstorm, that would bring those fast winds down, but at the surface, in clear weather or fair weather, so to speak, no thunderstorms, it will be relatively weak.
It's a good thing it only costs $18.99. Dell Dimension with an Intel Pentium 2 processor at 350 megahertz. Just $18.99. To order, go directly to the source. Dell, be direct.
You can also get reliable forecasts from the Weather Channel through this radio station or newspaper.
Each time a disturbance comes off the coast of Africa, we follow that until it develops into a storm or to whatever it does. That way you're prepared, you're safe, out of harm.
Okay, in this complex, he's here.
Okay.
You go down the strip, you take a left, and then a right on that street. I don't remember the name of the street, but there's that shop on the corner. Okay. Then you take another left, and the road forks, but you go straight.
Straight? How can I go straight if there's a sugar shaker in front of me?
The road forks, but the main road is straight. Then you take a left, and then a right, and he's on the left, but you gotta go around because it's one way. You can't turn that way.
Get out of here.
Experienceinthegardenstate.com now. Over 1 million have gotten tighter stomachs with 8-minute abs. And to celebrate our success, we created the 8-minute Gold Collection.
I went from this flabby spare tire to a washboard stomach. Thanks, 8-minute abs.
You'll get 8-minute abs, 8-minute buns, and 8-minute arms. All 3 videos for only $29.95. Flatten those abs, shape your buns, and tone your arms. Call now and we'll include 8-minute legs free. That's an $80 value for only $29.95. To order all 4 videos, call 1-800-257-5700 now.
How can you plan your day when you don't know what the weather's going to be like? I know people like to plan ahead for their day. I can help you out.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
Well, as we begin our tropical update, of course, the big story has been with Hurricane George, but we have other hurricanes. We've got 3 other hurricanes here. We're talking about Hurricane Karl, Hurricane Ivan, and also Hurricane Jeanne. We do not think these other 3 hurricanes are going to affect the lower 48, though. Okay, so that's some good news. Hurricane Jeanne is going to continue a northwest track and then eventually turn northward. Hurricane Ivan is going to be moving towards the east-northeast, and Hurricane Karl is going to continue moving towards the east too, so that is the good news. The bad news is Hurricane George has already made it on across the Keys and still looking at winds at 105 miles per hour. It's moving northwest at 14 miles per hour, and look at the path this thing has taken. It has killed already over 200 people, I believe, and we're talking about it making a path into the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps strengthening as we get on into the weekend. Looks like all interests along the Gulf Coast are going to be very, very intent on what is going on with Hurricane George. It's already got winds up to 105 miles per hour. We could see those winds increasing as it gets out over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll keep you posted. We'll have complete details coming up at the top of the hour. All right, Hurricane Karl, the latest on this one, winds at 75 miles per hour, moving east-northeast at 14 miles per hour, expected to continue that track and not affect the lower 48. This is the latest on Hurricane Ivan. Winds are at 80 miles an hour, moving northeast at 18 miles per hour, the pressure 984 millibars. It is expected to continue moving off towards the northeast and then eventually on off towards the east. And Hurricane Jeanne, finally. This one, the most powerful of the 3 out in the Atlantic, and we're talking about 105 mile per hour winds here, moving northwest at 13 miles per hour. The official track for Jeanne takes it towards the northwest a little while longer, and then eventually it will take a turn towards the north, due north, as it will start to weaken. So that's the good news about those 3 hurricanes. The bad news is we're still watching what's happening with Hurricane George, which leads me to our little tease into Weather Center. Yeah, coming up at the top of the hour, we'll give you all the details. Stay with us.
Hurricane George gathers intensity as it pounds the Florida Keys and threatens the Gulf Coast. For continuous live coverage and the latest warnings, watch Weather Center.